The action that never happens typically is they're talking themselves out of it, or they're creating actions that are probably not that important.
Hey, Ron, first things first, what is the number one thing people need to become unstuck and live the lives they believe they're deserving of?
The number one thing I would say is clarity of self, to know thyself.
What stops us from finding clarity on our journey?
Most of the time, people don't realize that they're working from their personality self or their ego self.
Welcome back, everybody, for another episode of A Few Minutes with Boo. Very excited by our next guest today. Talk about something that I guess a lot of us don't really think about, and we just accept. And if, gosh, it's just past New Year's, you look at 8% of people who make a New Year's resolution actually deliver it by the end of the year. One of the reasons why is it gets stuck, right? Despite our best intentions, we often find that we're just unable to click into another gear and move forward. And today our guest, Ron Frost, is going to share some of his insights into becoming unstuck, being who you're meant to be, and hopefully help you become one of the few. Hey, Ron, thanks so much for joining me on The Few today. I'm really pumped about our discussion. First things first, what is the number one thing people need to become unstuck and live the lives they believe they're deserve it of?
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on this show. I'm just grateful to be here. The number one thing I would say is clarity of self, to know thyself. And we all talk about this big word called purpose. And purpose, it's really up to the individual. Quite often we go about life somehow a little bit lost in our purpose, trying to fit in cultural, societal norms, or feeling what we should be, or relative to maybe one of our parents, what they did for a role. And when you get clarity of purpose, which really comes down to the fundamentals of know thyself, then you become empowered. You really know how to work life itself, and you're able to shine your light into the world in the best way possible. And so some people that I work with, I mean, that's where they are. They're a little bit lost, or maybe they kind of know their purpose, but they just don't know how to get out there and shine their light. So that's really where my work stems from.
So let's anchor on that, because I know there are people who find just the whole concept of finding their life purpose a challenge, and I'd like to maybe park that for a minute and lean into, on this particular podcast, people that generally, because they're listening to the show, have an idea or a dream that they're looking to fulfill. So let's say we do have a deep sense of purpose, but it just seems to be forever out of reach, or we can't pay the mortgage and pursue our purpose, or is that even important? How do we shift from wanting to live our life of purpose to living it?
So yeah, you brought up a good point. If you're inundated with so many distractions in life, paying the mortgage, paying any bill, it's coming from a perspective more of a state of being than doing. Although we live in a doing world and we have to do, but when we're aligned in a sense that we are understanding of the nature of the reality that we work within and how we serve, and we're clear about the energy that we're recycling, because the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, and everything that's within our our sense of being is really what's creating our life. So if we become conscious and self-aware of what's coming up, and a lot of people have some tightness around, maybe it's time, I don't have enough time, or they're frustrated because they have something that's reoccurring that's preventing them from moving forward. My work is basically helping them understand what that is. And as soon as they can see that, then they can change that. They become more self-empowered. And quite often, you hit the nail on the head. A lot of the people out there do have clarity of purpose, or maybe they kind of know. Maybe they found a niche, and that's the niche that they've always wanted to be in. But then later, as I've worked with them, they might be able to hone that a little bit more specific And that one little thing, that one little change can catapult them in a direction that where all the doors start to open. So yeah, clarity of purpose is good, but sometimes we need to be open enough to know that sometimes we need to kind of take a broader focus and bring it into that uniqueness that's within that person.
To live your life's purpose doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing it each and every day either, does it? I mean, fulfilling your purpose can be a side hustle. You can have a job that may not feel like you're uh, setting the world on fire or putting people on planet Mars, but at the same time, in your spare time, or if you create or become incredibly competent in a role, you create the space and time to do more purposeful things, right?
Sure. And part of that might be just something as small as being a good listener, being a person that there's a lot of people that love to do support roles. There's things in my life where I actually am there to help other people. And sometimes it's being able to do that in a mindful way and know that you're a contributor to somebody else's dream as well. So, yeah, you're right. It doesn't have to be your job. It doesn't have to be the thing that you're doing. But if you are discontented with the thing that you're doing, that your major whatever occupation that you're not happy with, well, then you need to check in. Is that really is the energy that you're generating through that really what you want? And in my book, I talk about, how do we change that, right? We can either change exactly what we're doing, do something different, because there's many different ways that we can create an income and create money in our life and abundance in our life, or can we change our mindset and how we serve that role? And a lot of times, people when I work with them, it is about changing the mindset. It really is.
Mindset's becoming such a powerful word in this day and age. And how do we connect that? I mean, you talk to three critical uh, elements to becoming unstuck and connecting with that purpose. You talk to clarity, you talk to focus, and you talk to action. And at face value, they're just three simple words, but each one actually conveys an enormous amount of power once you understand it. So talk to clarity for us. What stops us from finding clarity on our journey?
Well, Boo, most of the time, people don't realize that they're working from their their personality self or their ego self. Everybody really, if we think about it, we're divine beings that are living within a body. And when we start to contemplate that, we start to understand things from a more, I would say, personal power perspective. And the only way you connect with that is being quiet. The best way I would say is get away from all distractions, be out in nature, work with the breath or meditate, do gratitude work. If you have a gratitude journal, gratitude is one of the things that definitely can shift our perspective, gets us more into the now focus instead of worrying about the past or the future. And that way, if you do enough of that work, you start to become the clarity. You start to have clearer thoughts, clearer understanding. You start to have that inner truth meter that's helping you align through life. So it's the practices that you have to be intentional with. And I would say get away from electronics, get away from news. That's one of the best things. If you get away from news, to me is north, east, west, and south. That's the acronym. The only place you can really create change is here. It's within the self. And that's really what the practice of clarity is all about, is being able to have enough stillness in your life. And that is where you find yourself.
It's interesting you say that. I've actually just started a digital detox yesterday, and for a week I'm just not using my smartphone as a smartphone. I'm just going to let it be a phone, and that's it. And when I have to do things like this, like obviously I have to podcast, this is a digital means, but it's a human to human conversation. So the tool's okay for this, but not for scrolling, not for news, not for gaming, not for those distractions. And speaking of distractions, let's talk to focus. I mean, once we have clarity, how do we maintain our focus? I mean, it's just so easy now to to introduce procrastination, to find perceived important things to do, to take us away and off our path.
So for me, I like structure. Everybody's a little different. If I talk to somebody who's comes from more a creative space, a songwriter or an artist, I actually work with people like that too. Sometimes their way of being able to create habits and structure is a little different, a little looser. I like to actually have, whether it's the to-do list or the calendar or something that's of structure in nature. And you're right, we depend somewhat on our electronic devices for these things, although you can do it in a handwritten format. The more that you put your attention to having something done on a regular basis, I take for instance, like lifting weights or going to the gym. Once you commit to that, sooner or later it actually becomes habitual. I mean, we all know that. So if you're creating change, think about having something that where if you want focus, you want to have something on your calendar. You want to have something that's repetitive. You want to have something that, whether it's daily repetitive or weekly repetitive, as well as think about the people or the groups that you can associate with. If your goal is to write a book, look for a writer's group. That's going to help your focus right there because now you're around the mindset of other people doing the exact same thing. So focus can be created, but it's created by intention and it's created by making sure that you have the structure around it that's going to help you stay accountable. Once you've gained that momentum, then you're off and running. But it's that initial starting point that's really very important.
And that takes us to action. I think humans are very, very well intentioned. I don't think any human goes out to litter or to have an argument with someone on the road. I don't think anyone really is intentionally out there to create problems. But why why do our intentions and actions either become disconnected or the action just never happens?
Well, Boo, the action that never happens typically is the self feeling they're talking themselves out of it, or they're creating actions that are probably not that important. Cleaning their desk or rearranging business cards, not going and making the phone calls or meeting the people or going out there and doing the things that they know they need to do, regardless of what type of business or what type of purpose they're fulfilling. There's certain actions that are directly in line with achieving the results that they want. And so part of that, again, coming back to creating the habits around that and being self accountable to that or having an accountability partner, these things help by helping to keep the actions congruent with the dream or the desire that they're trying to create. And I'd say the other thing is listen to the self-talk. So that goes back to that, the power of knowing the self. If there is some self-talk that's going on, you're like, I don't feel good enough, or I don't feel worthy, or what, that comes back to that state of being. Because we're all worthy of our goals and our success. And if the self-talk is talking us out of it, matter of fact, if a lot of people are unconscious of their behavior, and I help them become conscious of their behavior quite often they're doing these activities that may not matter or it could be done at a different time, maybe not during their power hour of the day when they can connect with other businesses. They could do it later in the day. And yet they allow that to be the become the distraction or the thing that's not pushing them forward. So again, it comes down to the fundamentals of taking action, taking exactly the action that needs to be taken and having clarity around that, as well as having an accountability. I have an accountability partner, and I think it's one of the best things. And the inner voice, and just kind of knowing if you're not doing it, what is that conversation going on in your mind while you're not doing that? And that's typically the area that I help them with.
Yeah, it's a great. Back in the day, flying jets, it was the same scenario. You have a wingman, right? You always have someone that holds you accountable because you're just unable to think and do at the same time. You're either busy doing and you're caught in the weeds, or you're off and thinking more expansively and finding that space to think. And doing both as a human is really hard. So I think, Ron, what you do, it was effectively a wingman to people to help unpack those unconscious biases, to be able to break the self-talk and the talk track that we all have in there, to enable us to achieve those breakthroughs. And philosophically, and I'm sure you'll agree, performing and getting to where we want to in life is not what we do, it's what we believe, right?
Absolutely.
So, Ron, how can our listeners reach out to you to help them on their own journey to become unstuck, and to land that purposeful life that we all wistfully dream about when we go to sleep at night?
Well, Boo, my email address is probably the easiest one, which is frostspeaks@gmail.com. It's my website is ronaldfrost.com. So it's pretty simple. It's my fuller name. It's the name my mom called me when I was a kid.
Were you in trouble when you were making that website?
Yeah, I guess so. But Ron Frost was taken. So just to your listeners out there, it's ronaldfrost.com. Ron Frost is some other guy. But yeah, if they go there, they'll find a contact form and they can reach out to me that way. Or they're free to use my regular email address, which is frostspeaks@gmail.com as well.
Awesome, Ron. Thank you so much for joining me for a few minutes. Ron's details are down in the show notes. Just click the link to fewpodcast.com or follow us in the socials there, which will be directly above or below this post, whether you're watching it on YouTube. Remember, leave a review if you thought the podcast added value, and subscribe to all the channels. Because the more subscribers and listeners we have, the better guests we come on, the guests that are the caliber of Ron. Thanks so much, Ron, for joining me on The Few. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Boo. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, that wraps another episode of The Few. But before we go, I'd like to make a shout out to the team that make this podcast possible. The team at Afterburner. Real fighter pilots who travel the world helping organizations close the gap between where they are and where they want to be. It's the fighter pilot mindset, the methodologies, the ways of working, or what Afterburner call flawless execution. It's the techniques and trade secrets the Air Force uses to turn the dream of becoming a fighter pilot into a reality. Whether you have a leadership offsite, leadership retreat, maybe it's the annual event for your entire organization, or a sales kickoff. From 2 people to 2,000, Afterburner inspires people to believe that we can lift our performance to another level. So reach out and learn the secrets fighter pilots use to win 98% of the time.